Well, one of the damaged parts of the cabinet is this arm that is supposed to swing out and hold the work area when you unfold uh, the top to get the machine out. So when I initially removed this, I found that the pin that holds it in place is supposed to be riveted into the bracket to hold it for it to turn and spring out the way it's supposed to. Also, the spring that extends the bracket or the arm is gone. So I drilled a hole through the center of this rivet, and I've got just a small bolt. I think this is an M2.5, but it's just something small to go through the middle and hold it all in place. And then I'm going to use 24-hour JB Weld epoxy to keep everything together here. So I'm testing to make sure that bolting this together is going to work, and that I have it the right way up. The arm has a pinhole for when it retracts. There's a pin that holds it in place, and then when you open the lid, the one of the hinges on the lid holds the pin in place, and then when the lid is opened, it pulls the pin up and lets that arm spring out. So once I was sure that I had it in the right order, got out a little bit of JB Weld and mixed all that up. And I just used a T-head pin so that I had something small to get it together with. Mix it until it's an even gray, and then I first started by putting some on the head end of the bolt so it would set up and hold in that end of this rivet, because the way for this to hold as strong as possible is to make sure that there are as few gaps in the epoxy and the bolt. So that end now has epoxy in it, and it fits through the arm pivot point. And once I got it into the pivot point, of course, once there's epoxy there, you gotta be careful not to get it everywhere. And then after I had it through the rivet, double check that that's where it is, make sure that a little bit gets down into the rivet hole, and also it gets into the top end of the hole around the bolt there. So I placed it in and then wiggled around to get some to work down into the rivet hole. And then once I had worked some down into the rivet hole, working from that side to make sure that it doesn't get down onto the pivot area, I put the washer that I have and the nut on and covered it all with more epoxy. And this should fit back under the cabinet because this bracket has those dents in it. It's stamped with space for this, and I don't need to have this bolt super tight. I just need to get it very snug for the epoxy to hold tight when it sets, as long as I don't disturb it for 24 hours. So making sure I have it in the right order and moving properly before I put the rest of the epoxy on over the head of the nut here. And then that should, because the epoxy is going to bond to itself and to the different surfaces, that should be a pretty solid repair for this. I'm not worried because the alternative repair for this is to just replace the entire pivot rivet piece with a nut and bolt that is the right size for the arm to pivot on. So in the future, whenever this, if this fails for somebody, they'll just have to drill all this out and replace all of it, whether or not there was glue on there. So yeah. So I finished putting all that epoxy on there, and then this is going to set aside for 24 hours. And that should be ready to reinstall, and hopefully I will get a suitable replacement spring for this mechanism soon. I'm not sure what kind of spring, but it just has to be strong enough to flip that lever out when the trigger is let go, so it shouldn't be too hard to find something.